Thanks, Jake. Some of you guys, you don't know it, but I can't express how excited I am right now about what's going on in Fort Campbell. Some of you guys are here, some haven't been to Memorial, but right now, guys, we've spread out to 3 Bible studies. 3 places we're impacting soldiers for Christ. I'm praying at some point it'll get to 4, but I'm also praying that it expands more to Austin Peay as well as out in the community, because we're a community on the move. So that's what I'm one to look forward to, and I'm so excited because I think you guys will see it eventually. We're part of something great that God's doing, and it's just so fun to partner with you. I like listening to what Jake said. He said, I've been here in pursuing Christ for 8 years. You'd think that time would equal maturity, but it just doesn't. Tonight I'm going to talk about the call to dependence. And so I'm going to look out of Matthew chapter 11. As we get started, there's a story I like that Chuck Wood told me as I was hanging out with him. He was living with Cecil Bean for a period of time, and while he was listening to Cecil, he had a young son, Rusty Bean. And one day, Rusty was sitting there with his, he had an apple out, and the apple was too big for his mouth. So what he did is he broke out a knife and started just sawing on this apple, just sawing forever. But the problem was he wasn't making any progress, and Chuck recognized this. And he almost told him, hey, Rusty, that's a plastic knife. But as he's getting ready to say that, Cecil stopped him. And he didn't realize why he stopped him, but he quit talking to him or quit approaching him about it. And at the end of it, Rusty made no progress. He came frustrated. The burden of sawing on that apple was too great. So he eventually asked his dad, what's the issue? And his dad's like, you got the wrong tool for the job. So he gave him a real knife, and he was able to slice through it. And Chuck later on asked Cecil why. He says, well, he needed to learn how to come to me. He needed to learn how to use the right instrument. So Cecil allowed that time for him to get a lesson. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about this call to dependence, this call of recognizing that we need to have somebody to depend on. And primarily, for us, it is Christ. So we're going to start out in Matthew 11, and we're going to be going Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. Just to give a little background information for this, just starting out in verses 20 through 24, Jesus is rebuking hard 3 cities because he had done a tremendous amount of work and teaching in those cities, and the only thing that they did was continue to go about their life as normal. They did not listen to him whatsoever. Nothing changed. And then he went down in the next few verses in 25 through 26. Jesus prayed in the midst of the crowd. He prayed to his Father. It's kind of interesting to me how he prayed while people were still around, but he still did. But the thing that I like about it, he says, despite those 3 cities rejecting me, those 3 cities of people, there's still some who will accept me. There's some who are willing to come to me and be dependent like a child, and have the trust in me like a child would their parents. And that's where we pick up in Matthew 11, 28 through 30. I'm going to go ahead and have somebody read that for us. Does anybody want to read Matthew 11, 28 through 30 for me?
Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
There's 3 imperatives that we've got to look at. There's 3 things that Jesus really says that you and I can do right now, today. The same things he talked to those people about then that they could come do right then, he's saying we can do it today. The first imperative, the first thing he said was come to me. Come to me. It was a general invitation. It was a personal invitation. It was a relevant invitation, and it was real. Jesus is saying, I've taken a step towards you. I've healed, I've taught, you've heard from me, you've learned from me. Come to me. Take that step towards me. This reminds me of the call that Jesus did to the 12, to his key disciples in Matthew 4:19, where he says, come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. Jesus told them to come with purpose, and that come this time did not change. Jesus recognized that they were burdened and wearisome. He says, come to me because I want to give you rest, because I want to take care of you. And what did he want them to do? He wanted them to come to know him, to understand him, to follow him. But it took them taking that chance to come to him. And the people that were to come to him, he gave a great descriptor. And he says, all you who are weary and burdened. Let's take a flip over just real quick to Matthew 23, 1 through 4. And let's take a look at some of the things that they were burdened with. Just one of the things, because this is where Jesus always hits a home run at. And I'll read that real quick. Matthew 23, 1 through 4. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat, so practice and observe whatever they tell you, but not what they do. For they preach, but do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay on them people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. The difference between Jesus' burden and theirs is Jesus says, come to me and I'll show you. I'll teach you. Theirs, you must do. There is very little instruction. There was very little of them saying, do what I do. They basically said, do what I don't do. Just listen to my words. And I just think today there are so many things that weary and burden us. One of the things that burden us and weary us so much is not necessarily the internal toil of working, sweating, getting our elbows and knees dirty, but it's the internal toil that comes from sin. It comes from our choice to do what we want rather than what God wants. The other burden that comes is life's distresses. The things in life that get us down, the things in life that take us out and hurt us. I can't really give an idea of what all the distressors are in each of your lives or even the sins. But what I do know is that Jesus stands and says, come to me. I want to shoulder those. I want to be there for you. One of the guys I think about is Charlie Sheen. And to the world's view, Charlie Sheen, man, he's a movie star. He had all the money. Even for some, he had all the gals. But in reality, he never had the rest inside that Jesus promised. His sin and his burdens killed him. He turned to alcohol. He turned to drugs, other things, instead of to Christ. He replaced what Jesus wanted to do for something that was false. Jesus stands and says for us today to come to him. And gang, if you've never taken that step towards him, or you're interested in it, ask the person behind you out. Ask him, how do I take that next step to Christ so that I can know him, follow him, and believe in him? The next imperative that he really gives is take my yoke upon you. Looking at this, and some of you guys may have had this thought already too. Looking at this, it surprised me. Jesus already recognized that these people were weary, burdened, wore out as all get out, and then he's saying, I want to put a little extra load on you. And I was like, man, that's almost enough. That's a big enough straw to break the camel's back. But that's not the case. When I think about a yoke, and some of you guys may have some experience with a yoke, it's just a piece of wood that joins two oxen together. And what it does, it empowers them and unites them together so they can carry double the weight of what they naturally could carry alone. So one oxen, say estimated, could carry or pull 500 pounds on their own. So both those oxen separately could carry 2,000 pounds. But when you unite those two oxen together, collectively, they can tow 2,000. Whenever Jesus says, yoke ourselves with him, our burden does not become less. The significance and the impact of it in our life does. Because it's now just not us alone towing the weight. Jesus is towing it with us. The burden never disappears. But Jesus says, I want to help. Jesus desires for us to be yoked to him. And what that looks like is choosing to be his disciple, choosing on a consistent basis to follow him. For some, what it looks like is getting up in the morning and say, reading your Bible, reading just a chapter a day, and spending a few minutes in thought and a few more minutes in prayer. Choosing to yoke yourself with discipleship, to be his follower. Jesus says, take my yoke. Unite yourself with him. Today, Jesus, to me, he's sitting here and he's saying to these people, I am committed to you. Will you be committed to me? Will you yoke yourself with me? The next thing that I look at from here is that Jesus gives the idea of learn from me. When two oxen are yoked together, they can't necessarily, without some training and understanding from some trainer, to learn how to pull that much weight together. But when they spend that time learning, when somebody spends that time pouring into them, training them to help them to become the most productive oxen they can be, that's when they reach their max efficiency. Jesus says, don't only just take my yoke, don't just bond yourself with me, but learn from me. He wants us to shift, exchange one yoke for the other, to exchange what we think are priorities, to exchange for what he says are priorities. I like two priorities, and there's so many good ones, but if you can master, you can think on just these two priorities, you're going to start to master the Christian life. Let's turn into what Jesus says in Matthew 22. And let's look down at Matthew 22, 37 through 40. I'm going to go ahead and read that for us real quick. Matthew 22, 37 through 40. And he said to them, you shall love the Lord your God with your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commands depend all the law and the prophets. Jesus wants us to exchange our priorities. What we want is to make ourselves a priority. We want to make our pursuits, our job, our career, our pleasures more important than anything else. Jesus is like, I want you to learn how to exchange those, to prioritize on the two things that I've given you. The two things, to love God or to love me with all you are, and to love other people the way I've loved you. To love God and to love people. He gave those two priorities. And what I like about these two priorities, even to the youngest Christian, the one who just recently decided to live for Christ, they are easily understandable. You can capture quickly. Man, these are two easy things to live for. But even for the most mature Christian, these things are inexhaustibly deep. You could go the rest of your life learning what it looks like to love God with all your heart and to help somebody else to know him as well. And it just gets better as you go down the road. In the beginning, it's an easy to comprehend, easy to catch. But the end is so much joy, so much excitement comes from that. Jesus wants us to come to him. He wants us to partner with him in bearing the yoke. And he also wants us to learn from him, to exchange our priorities for his. I like to look at the Apostle Paul in Acts. Some of you guys may have read Acts, but as he's going down the road, his name is Saul. And what he's doing is he's thinking he's living for God, doing the right thing. But in the end, when he encounters Christ, he learns that he did the wrong thing. He was persecuting the very people that were pursuing God. And when he encountered Christ, he spent the time to get to know what Jesus' priorities were. He spent the time to figure out how to go at those priorities, how to live for him. His life is someone who learned from God, and he exchanged. So tonight, I just think about all those. And man, if you've never had a chance to read through the Bible, say in a year, get to it. It's very important to get a complete understanding of God. And if you don't know where to start, find somebody who is willing to help you to move forward. Partner up with somebody else who's pursued Jesus just a little bit longer than you, so that you can start to figure out some of the things of Christ. And so tonight, I like to give a basic invitation. If you've never taken the step towards Christ, to want to live for Him, so He can remove some of those burdens, to help carry that yoke, or to carry the yoke of the burdens with you, man, take that step towards Him. If you don't know what it looks like, ask. And if you have taken that step, your call is to figure out what it looks like to love Him and to love people. So tonight, Jesus doesn't desire for us to go through life on our own. He doesn't desire for us to engage the world around us and the things that are going on alone. He wants to carry that burden of life with you. It doesn't mean that burden changes. It never has. But He wants to help lessen that load. So tonight, gang, my call is to dependence on Christ rather than being independent on my own. Thanks for your time.